Hey, I'm John Gordon with Positive University, and today my guest is Ryan Leaf. Ryan, you just tweeted recently that you were watching football with your son. What was that like?
Well, I kind of mentioned in the tweet that I didn't necessarily know if I'd ever be able to utter those words. So for me, it was really based in gratitude and it was a humbling experience and just pure joy to, my fiance took the picture, and she tends to do that. She tends to take some pictures that I don't necessarily know that are happening. And they just really, I think, exemplify where my life's at right now.
So if you could describe where your life is at right now, how would you describe that?
Peaceful and unchaotic, I think is the best way to put it. I feel like I wasn't necessarily ever at peace, and I feel like I created chaos from time to time. And the fact that I can sit and meditate and pray and like be still for more than 15 minutes is dumbfounding to me.
That's awesome. So a lot of people know your story. I know your story. A lot of people may not know your story. If you're at a party with someone and you're just meeting them for the first time and they ask you about like, hey, who you are, like, what do you do? What do you tell them? And like, where do you start?
I wear a lot of hats now. So I usually just kind of, I tell them that I'm in media, I'm doing some broadcasting and have a radio show, and then travel around the country and do a lot of speaking. And then if they want to know more, I usually get into more depth about why I get the opportunity to go around the country and speak. And it starts with my story and where I came from and what it turned into and where I'm at now.
Well, let's start where you came from. I think that'd be a great place to share with people who don't know your story.
I'm from a real small town in Montana called Great Falls. We're a large state geographically, but very small in population. And we have one area code for the whole state, 406. So just hit 1 million people. I'm the only first round draft pick in the NFL ever from the state of Montana. So there are more first round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana. So that there's a uniqueness that exists there, and kind of made me think I was a little special for a while. Grew up in a loving community, a loving family, played every sport imaginable, was very good, kind of placed on a pedestal early, developed some ideals that aren't necessarily true. Money, power, and prestige is what makes you successful. And then I chose to go to Washington State, where I would play collegiate football for 3 years and do really well, excel enough to the point where I became the second pick in the NFL draft in 1998.
And a lot of people may know about this part. So you were the second pick in that draft. Had an NFL career. Talk about that career and what happened.
I didn't live up to the expectations, not only for myself, but for a lot of the fans and the individuals out there that thought I was going to be great. And even though I did play for 4 years, it wasn't what I would consider successful. And it's hard to imagine that somebody would say that who made it to the NFL, that it wasn't a successful career. But I had a lot of expectations, and so did a lot of people. And ironically, what people consider me to be is one of the biggest busts of all time, which says two things. It says that I was really, really good, and B, that I didn't live up to those lofty expectations that everybody and myself had for me.
When those expectations were coming at you, how did that make you feel during that time?
I thought that was about right. I expected to go in there, win a lot of games, win championships, play for 15 to 20 years. That's what I expected to happen. And, that's not life. Life isn't fair. It's about how you deal with things that matters. And I didn't have that perspective yet. I didn't have that humility and that open-mindedness and that perspective.
During that time, did you turn to drug use or alcohol at that time to alleviate the pain from those expectations?
When I left the league, when I essentially retired, I think that my drug of choice for a large portion of my life was competition. And I competed at everything. I had to win at everything. And if I lost, I had to run it back immediately. And if I did, I'd want to beat you the next time and probably embarrass you in the process the next time. And so when my career was over, I was introduced to Vicodin while I was playing because of my physical injuries. And then one night in Las Vegas, where I was going to be at a lot of functions with Super Bowl champions and Hall of Famers, where I always felt judged and less than when I walked into those types of parties. An acquaintance of mine offered me some Vicodin, and I took it that night, and it did its job. It's a painkiller. I was in emotional pain, feeling like a failure. I was going through some mental health issues with depression and anxiety and narcissistic personality disorder, all those things. And this worked. So I started self-medicating with Vicodin, the only drug I've ever taken in my life, but the one that I knew worked. And that would become an issue for me for probably the next 8 years, where I self-medicated my feelings away and just tried to be numb and not feel any of that.
Were there any indications that this would be an issue when you were in high school or college?
I don't believe so. Although I think I do have an addictive personality when it comes to, like I said, I was a drug addict long before ever I took a drug. I think when it came to competition, I competed at everything, and I was kind of OCD about it. I was very focused, very intense. I didn't like when people didn't take things seriously. So I think, that obsession, of course, rolled over to when I knew this worked. This took away everything. I didn't feel better. I just didn't feel anything. I was just looking for that escape, that I didn't feel like a loser. I didn't feel like a bust. I didn't feel like I'd let people down. And I just thought that I was still a success too, because I had all this money and all this power. And even though the prestige of being a starting NFL quarterback was kind of tarnished, I'm still a former NFL quarterback. And in circles, that was good enough.
I mean, you're so inspirational. What you've accomplished now and who you've become, to me, is incredible. So we have this incredible spot you're at now, but I want to go back to the lowest of the low. Like, where was your breaking point that made today possible? How would you describe the lowest of the low where you were?
I think I kept thinking I had hit the lowest point, and then it got lower and it got lower and it got lower. I think, the very bottom for me, I thought was, Googling ways to kill yourself and then attempting suicide. You'd think that was the lowest, but then I ended up in prison and nothing changed. I think being in a prison cell, being more self-loathing, more self-hatred, and then kind of going, I'm okay with this. That was probably the most scariest thing that there was, that I was okay with living in this cell, not improving or doing anything. And frankly, if it weren't for my roommate, I don't know if any of this would have been possible moving forward.
What would happen with your roommate?
He was a Afghanistan and Iraq war veteran, and had done something a lot of people have done at some point in their lives, and that's drive drunk. And he happened to kill somebody that night, and he was in prison since he was 23. He was now 31. And I watched him every day try to better himself. He had made amends for done. He had tried to move on in a positive way. He had this faith and the spirituality that existed. And I just looked at him every day and thought, what the hell are you doing, man? This is stupid. We're losers. We're in prison. And finally, one day he felt comfortable enough, and he kind of essentially got on me about how I didn't understand the value I had, and that I had my head buried in the sand, and my value not only for the men in there, but for when I got out. Because he said, Ryan, you're going to get out at some point. You just can't hide in here. And he said, they're just going to go down to the prison library and help prisoners who don't know how to read learn how to read. And I've had many of those come to Jesus moments in my life, mentors, family, coaches. And I literally just kind of flipped him the bird, and said, I got this. I don't need your help. For whatever reason I went, begrudgingly. I don't know why I did, but I did. And I went to a place where guys were not supposed to show vulnerability in prison. 50-year-old men who told me they couldn't read, which I think is unbelievably transparent and vulnerable. And then I started helping. And I showed up the next day, and then I showed up the next, and I realized that I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. And I was sleeping better. And just things were changing. My mindset, the way I looked at things, it really had zero to do with me. No one was watching this. There was no media. There was no branding or marketing or anything like that. This was just between me and another human being trying to better each other. And I think it did that. And it's about consistency, and it's about showing up. I always liken it to going to the gym. You don't go to the gym and then the next day wake up and look like The Rock in the mirror. You have to show up and be consistent. And it took time. And it took about 3 or 4 months. And then when I was get out, I knew that that was going to have to be at the foundation of what I did. Otherwise, I was just going to return to be the same guy I'd always been.
What were you in prison for?
Burglary, for taking pills from friends' homes, and also having a controlled substance possession of a controlled substance.
And how long were you in prison for?
32 months, so almost 3 years. So significant amount of time. I honestly can't believe it. I just passed the amount of time I've been out as much as time as I've been in here recently, which I think is weird. So it's not a long time. It was December 3rd, 2014 when I got out, and how different my life is just because of the decision to make different choices. The understanding that I have control over dealing with any situation in a positive or healthy way rather than the negative and toxic one that I think I did, for the majority of my life.
Yeah, I remember watching the news and watching you go to prison and thinking like, wow, what is going on with him? Because you had so much potential. When you meet people who have potential, but they have pressure and they have expectations, like what advice do you give them now after having been through that?
Well, I tell them, usually when I sit in that room, especially you do the same thing, you go speak to these college football teams and collegiate athletes, and they're watching me tell my story, and I can just see the look on some of their faces like, yeah, this is a good story, but that's never going to happen to me. And so I kind of try to redirect and say, hey, which part's not going to happen to you? You're not going to be the second pick in the NFL draft to be a millionaire, or are you not going to be the drug addict felon? They're not mutually exclusive. Both things can happen. And so I try to impart that on them. Also, just really show them that they have a choice to deal with any situation, good or bad. If something bad happens in your life, you have the control to deal with it in a positive and healthy way. Everybody's going to have this fork that they come to, regardless of how big the decision is or choice is, no matter what. And I use the example of using Q-tips in the morning. I use a Q-tip to clean my ear out in the morning and throw it at the trash can. And, 9 times out of 10, it goes in the trash can, but the 10th time it may not. And I always would just look right back in the mirror. I wouldn't go over and simply pick it up and put it in the trash because I thought I was entitled to have someone pick up after me. And that's a small choice, really small. But if you're not practicing those little things every single day, when the huge choice happens, like you're at a party and somebody offers you a drug, or you've been drinking and offers you the keys, or even more importantly, if you're with a girl and at some point she says no and stop, those are huge life decisions. But if you haven't been practicing just the little ones, I guarantee you they're over like that. And people think that this is a stretch, but I tell you right now, when I was 18 years old, and if I could have thought of my future self at 36, standing in front of a house, thinking about burglarizing it for its pills, that seems like a simple choice that I would make that says no. No, I'm not going to do that. But all those choices of negative and toxic ones over time built up to that point where I felt like there wasn't a consequence. I could just do what I wanted, instant satisfaction, and that I needed it. And the ends justified the means.
That's so powerful. If you never went to prison, though, you wouldn't be doing the great work you're doing now. So it almost all ties together.
Yeah.
The bad and the good. This is Positive University. How do we help people realize that their bad could lead to good? What's your advice there?
Well, my advice usually is that if I can stand in front of them and tell them that I'm grateful for having spent 32 months in prison. I don't recommend it, but I'm grateful. There's some humility there. And my hope is that when I share my story, that somebody will hear something they can relate to and they don't have to go to that place. Now, it has to be your bottom. You have to experience it. You have to experience whatever that looks like, and the change has to occur. That's on you. Hopefully it doesn't have to happen that way, but we're all flawed human beings trying to be better every single day. And sometimes getting that across to very successful, elite athletes is difficult. And I always kind of mess with them a little bit. And I tell them, like, there's a fine line, between elite athlete and asshole. And I just kind of bounce back and forth between those lines for a long time until kind of settling on asshole for a long time. But it's fine. If you want to be different and be successful, there has to be some eccentricity to you. There's an edge to you, but an understanding that you are just like everybody else. You have to understand that. And when you're placed on a pedestal most of your life, you develop this idea that you're better than people for whatever reason, simply because I can play a sport better than you. When in reality, I'm just the same. You just may know more about my story than I know about yours, but I guarantee if you told me yours, I would be just as inspired, because everybody deals with adversity. Everybody goes through so much stuff and comes out the other side better.
So I was a Division I athlete, and I had my identity. I got my identity from my performance, my success, my results. And same thing, I didn't go through the struggles that you went through, but I definitely went through a period of where I had to learn to serve others, to be of service, to truly find greatness. I always say you have to lose your ego, right, in the service of others, to find the greatness within you. And it's like you're doing that now. You seem, an incredible spot right now. Like, what are you doing to serve others now? Tell us about your work, because I want people to understand how you've taken that bad and now the amazing things you're doing.
Well, the biggest thing is, and when people ask me, how can I be of service? They assume that I mean, like, you're going to a shelter or you're donating clothes. And I always tell them that my story is my biggest serviceable item. It really is. To walk in and actually show true honesty, transparency, and vulnerability is a huge piece of service. And if everybody else can do something similar and there's a domino effect, that would be huge. That's where I'm of service. I just simply, when asked, I do too. That's another thing, is when I'm asked to do something in the service of somebody else, I say yes. That's like a 180-degree lifestyle change for me. And that was the only way I was going to fix it. Otherwise, I was just going to continue to behave the same way I'd always behaved and probably end up back in a prison cell or dead. And so that's the way I'm of service. I have a nonprofit called the Focused Intensity Foundation, which raises money for scholarships for people who can't afford substance abuse and mental health treatment. Because when I got out of prison, I couldn't rub two pennies together. I was once making $5 million a year, and I couldn't rub two pennies together, and I couldn't afford treatment, and I wanted it. And if it weren't for the grants that were available to me from the NFL, I wouldn't have been able to go. So I never want anybody who truly wants to change their life get the help that they need, but not be able to do it because they can't afford it.
And when you speak to these teams that you do now, I know you spoke to UW, incredible talk, saw a clip of it. I mean, that was one of the most powerful clips I've ever seen. What's your message to athletes now? And really it's a message for everyone, but you're speaking to student athletes in that moment, but what's the message for everyone?
Well, a lot of people assume that it's like I go in there and tell them what not to do. And that's not the truth, because what I did for a long period of my life worked and it got me to the level they want to get to. So I just try to tell them about how you have choice. You have choice, what things are important in life, that money, power, and prestige aren't it. And I think we see that all the time. And a lot of them assume that as long as they get to the NFL and they get a big paycheck, all their problems go away. When in fact, my problems really exacerbated when I got a bunch of money. You really can tell a person's values and integrity and character when they get a lot of money. Because if you're not right to handle that, it's going to magnify. Doesn't mean you can't live with abundance and be successful if you have the right mindset. And so I talk to them about that And I talked to them about the ideals that I live by now: accountability, spirituality, community. Those are the three ones. And I don't necessarily go in there and tell them what to do or what not to do. I just simply go in there and tell them my story. And what they do with it, I can't control. What they do with my message, I can't control. But I know I'm doing my part, and I'm being part of the solution. And that's all I can control, which is important to understand, that though I think I can control a lot, I can only control what I do and how I lay my head down at night of what I've done that day.
Can you talk about those three values that you talk about just briefly for each one?
Yeah, accountability for me is big in the sense that I was never accountable for anything or anybody my whole life. And, there was a moment when I finally could walk by that prison cell mirror and look myself in the mirror and go, Ryan, you're here because of what you did, no one else. And that was transformational, because I blamed the NFL, I blamed the media, I blamed the doctors, my family, my hometown. I blamed a lot of people when I can't control what those people did. I only could control what I contributed to that. And that's what I'm responsible for. And that's a huge realization. Most people can figure that out on their own. It took me 36 years and being put in a prison cell to fully understand that. The second one was spirituality. There was a joke that Sports Illustrated ran that went, "What's the difference between God and Ryan Leaf?" And the punchline is that God doesn't think he's Ryan Leaf. And, I thought it was hilarious. And it's silly. I don't know what God is. I don't necessarily buy into any religion. I kind of steal from all of them, all the good parts. I just know that there is one, and I'm not it. And that's spirituality for me. It can come in many parts. Something I read, something a mentor tells me, nature. For a guy that didn't go outside but 2 times in those 32 months, being in nature is a huge spiritual thing for me. And the third thing is community. When you're placed on that pedestal, you remove yourself from a community. You think you're better. And then at my lowest point, I didn't want to be around anybody. I distanced myself. I was isolated. I was not part of a community. I live in Los Angeles now, where there are 2,500 meetings a week. The stigma does not exist when it comes to substance abuse and mental health disorder. And I put myself right in the middle of that community. I'm not going to get picked off on the outside. I surround myself with like-minded people who hold me accountable. And then I get to travel this country, and that community gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And I get to interact with people such as yourself, and our values and our integrity and character match up, and we get to make that community even bigger and bigger like that. When I know you work with Lane Kiffin, and when I sat with him, I'd known him years ago, and the change in that man, simply because he's chose to think in a different way, remove himself from the equation and be about others. That's a perfect example. And the fact that we got to meet each other at that point in our lives, I think is undeniably accurate to what we're trying to accomplish.
I was going to say, now you're building this great community, and it's a bigger and bigger community that you're building. So you're getting to interact with more and more people, help more and more people, and then the feedback just comes back to you. It's amazing. Like, the more you put out there, it comes back to you, and you feel better and better. Do you feel that energy just continuing to grow?
That's the amazing thing about it. The selfless nature of what you're doing ends up being super validating and building you up, which is amazing. I always tell the kids or those young adults about, I defy you not to have the most peaceful night of sleep after you've been of service to another human being that day. I defy you to do it, because I sleep like a baby. And it's all because of that. And it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And what it's also allowed me to do is then go after goals that I've always wanted to do. I wanted to be in broadcasting. I was a broadcast journalism major, and a lot of times guys get into recovery, and that's the foundation. Yes. But that's what it only becomes, instead of actually trying to achieve the things that I always wanted to achieve. I wanted to be a color commentator. I wanted to be like Kirk Herbstreit. And this Saturday, the Pac-12 network has given me an opportunity. I get to call my first football game. I have a national radio show on Sirius XM on every day on the Pac-12 conference channel. it's kind of come full circle because of the choices I made revolving around the idea of recovery. It allows me to be the person I've always wanted to be.
Yeah, a friend said it should not be the recovery that should be your high point. It should be what the recovery leads to and what you do after, and the fruit you produce from investing in that route in that moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the strongest thing I have ever done is get sober. I really do. And to admit my flaws and to show everybody it's okay. But that's going to be the foundation. And I'm going to build a building that's stable through the process. And some of those things aren't necessarily going to revolve around recovery, but my mindset, the way I think, is going to be revolve around recovery. And it's what's going to make me, it's almost like a guide to living is the best way I can put it. It guides me in my living process, whatever that looks like moving forward.
And I've seen you on Rich Eisen a bunch of times. When you're doing these interviews, when you're doing broadcasting, you really seem at peace. You seem like you're in that present moment. You're not worried about what people are thinking. You're just really just being you, enjoying the moment. Does that feel great?
Well, I really understood what the word humility, what the definition of humility is. And it's understanding who you are. It's not anything else. It's a full understanding of who you are, meaning that it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks of you. I know who I am. I'm okay with who I am. And I'm going to be okay no matter what anybody else says. And that's where I think when I go on a show like Rich Eisen and Dan Patrick, or even hosting my own radio show, I have a core value system now that exists that I believe in, and I know who I am. So when I speak, it most understandably comes across at peace because I believe it, and I believe in what I'm doing is right. And I'm open-minded though to what other people's plights are, and I have empathy, and that's a big difference to actually put yourself in somebody else's shoes rather than just have sympathy for somebody, but actually have empathy. That transformed a lot of my thinking as well.
We see young people today that they just seem like they're losing hope about the future. Some are unfortunately taking their lives that they feel so hopeless. What do we say to those people that have just lost hope?
I try to put myself in their shoes, and then I try to get myself in front of them somehow and say, hey, I know exactly how you're feeling. I was right there. And if I could just be that beacon of light somehow, that lighthouse or that safe harbor, and say, hey, it's going to hurt like hell, but it's going to be okay. I'm the perfect example of that. And I have I have a scar on my left wrist for knowing exactly what that feeling felt like and where I was at. I can't even imagine that, 7 years ago, almost 7 years ago, I was in this place that I thought that was the only answer. So I know exactly where they're at. So it's important for me. And it's actually what I have to do. I cannot have somebody else, a peer, another human being, a friend, anybody not be on this planet because they didn't think they were worth it. That by far is my greatest goal and wish and hope. And I'm going to continue to try to make that the foundation of my platform moving forward.
I love that because they can see where you were. They can see how you thought it was hopeless and then what you're doing now, and know that there's always hope, because there's always a future. And you're watching football with your son when you never thought that would have ever happened.
Also, I just never thought I'd have children because I was so selfish in my thinking that I told myself that I wouldn't want to give a child my last name. They would be mistreated or something like that. And I forget that that's my father's name. That's my grandfather's name. Both veterans to our country, strong, character, men and values. And it has nothing to do with me. That might be the most selfish thing I could think of. And when Anna, my fiance, told me she was pregnant, she told me that she'd never seen a bigger smile on my face. So that told the story. And what I've got to live the last 11 months since he's been born and the 9 months previous has given me so much gratitude. I can't, it's immeasurable.
So I like to do the Triple H, and then we have just a few more questions. The Triple H is your hero, a hardship, I think we know what that is, and a highlight of your life. But First, who's your hero? You talked about your dad and your grandfather, but who's your hero?
My father. My father's my hero. My dad's a two-tour Vietnam veteran who came home and wasn't welcome back for fighting in a war he didn't want to fight in, but was drafted, and then proceeded to go get his college degree, take a job, raise 3 sons, become a successful businessman, and become a successful businessman in a town that was hard for him to live in. My hometown doesn't like me, and for good reason. I was boorish and I behaved inappropriately, and then I came back and victimized the community. So it makes sense. But my father did all of this so he's my hero, and I go to him for guidance, and I also bribed him a little bit because I gave him his first grandson. So I'm now the favorite son again until the other brothers contribute. But he's my hero. My hardship, of course, was just dealing with the adversity that I dealt with. And I think everybody should have some sort of hardship just so they can find out who they are and how it's not going to kill them. They're going to make it through. And so that was definitely my hardship, just dealing with the celebrity, the fame, the failure, all that adversity, and then coming out the other side. And the hardship of dealing with success too is real, to be able to deal with success and not self-sabotage, but actually do something good with it. I think it's been a solid hardship too, because it's been on both spectrums there. And the third thing was
your highlight.
Oh, my highlight was meeting Anna and my son being born. I mean, it's amazing what our bodies can do, in particular a woman's body, and to watch the birth and to hold my son, and to, in that moment, immediately go from any selfish nature that you may have to the selflessness that you never knew existed. That's a miracle. That's a miracle, because everything I do now is about them. Everything I do is about them. Hustling the way I do to stay busy and earn a living so I can provide for him like my parents provided for me and give him a better life. And the fact that I'm going to have my story to try to help him be the best possible version of himself is great. But again, as all parents know now, you can't control what they do with it. They're going to have to make their own decisions and deal with their own consequences. But I have a perspective that maybe a lot of parents would A, never tell their kids, or B, not know how to.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have a son who's 18 years old right now, a freshman in college. So we know the choices that
yes.
And a daughter who's 20. So it's it's interesting. And my wife,
I'm just starting.
Yeah, exactly. And as you're talking about choices, I'm thinking my prayer this morning was, I hope they make good choices today. I pray for that every day. God, help them make good choices.
That's my prayer for myself right now. And it will, I'm sure it will be when he's old enough to be out of my sight at some point.
If he loves to play football, will you teach him how to be a quarterback?
I don't know if we're going to let him play football. Well, we're not going to let him wear a helmet, at least until he's a freshman in high school. And then we're going to allow him to make that choice, give him all the information. Cause I believe I'm living with CTE. I think that the addiction side of things helped me address it, where I now deal with the symptoms in a healthy alternative. And I think a lot more people we're going to find out are living with that. And we can do it, even though we can't diagnose it until postmortem. So for him, and we don't have any idea what 15 years from now football is going to look like. Heck, it may be flag football. And there's a good chance that MacGyver is going to be like 6'9" or 6'10". So we'll funnel him more towards basketball, but he can do whatever he wants. If he wants to be a dancer, a fly fisherman, an astronaut, whatever, he can do anything he puts his mind to. I know that.
His name is MacGyver?
Yeah.
He will be able to do anything then.
hope that's not a lot of pressure on, for him to be able to do anything. That's for sure. But it fits him. If you get a chance to see him, it fits him for sure.
So last question, what are you excited about now? I know there's so much going on. Excited for this new broadcast you're doing with Calling the Game, but what are you excited about in the future?
I'm just excited about tomorrow. I don't necessarily look too far out into the future. What I have ahead of me today, was, get up, do my radio show, do your podcast, hopefully reach a new audience, some more people. And then, I have meetings the rest of the day, and, I travel tomorrow to go speak. So it's really all about today. I'm not, because, past behavior is evidence that I could easily be back in prison again if I don't continue to live this day the same way I've lived the last 6 years of my life. So it's important to remember that I continue to be a flawed human being trying to be better, because I still mess up. I do. I have an 11-month-old kid, so I mess up all the time now. And I just got to be able to be accountable for those mistakes, make amends when I need to, and just continue to try to be better every single minute I can.
Where are you going to speak tomorrow?
I head to South Dakota. I'm in Sioux Falls, Vera Health panel and convention. And then from there, I head to Pullman, Washington to call the San Jose State, Washington State game on Saturday night. So busy week, but I love being busy now. It's the best elixir there can be, is to be busy and not have to overthink things.
Isn't the high of making a difference the best high you can have in terms of, like, I call it the best drug. Like, after I'm done speaking, knowing I've impacted people, there's no better feeling in the world knowing that you made a difference in someone's life.
I think so. And sometimes I don't fully understand it, because I've kind of become pretty resolute in the idea that I can't control what I'm doing. I'm just, or how it's received. I'm just doing my part. But yeah, when you get a message, 6 months later from somebody who said they saw your interview on the John Gordon podcast and they went and sought treatment. And I'm so proud to tell you I'm 6 months sober today, and thank you. It's not validation I need. I don't need the pat on the back, but that feels good too. We're human beings. We want to be recognized for the good we're doing. And, vice versa, you need to be held accountable for the wrong you're doing. And that's just how it goes. But yeah, like I said before, the best nights of sleep for me come when I've been of service to another human being that day. It really does.
Are you going to write a book?
People have come to me about it. I want as much evidentiary proof that I continue to do it. I feel like people spit out a book after they've had a little, good time or sobriety. I want some evidence-based substance behind it, and to do the most good, just so, people see it. And then, 3 months later, the guy's back in prison again. They're like, well, what, how am I supposed to believe anything that guy ever says, type of mentality. But that's the thing about addiction and mental health, as long as you keep getting up, it's never over. When it's over is when you concede and you don't get up again.
I admire that a lot. Dabo Sweeney, after he won the national championship, was talking to Dabo, and he didn't want to write a book. He said, I'm not ready to write a book yet. I still need to lead my guys. I still want to be there for my family and my kids. I'm not ready to write a book yet. And I thought it was great that he wasn't willing to just do that at that moment.
Yeah, it's just, I think the ending's still being written. How can you write a book when there's not an ending? The ending for me I think it's getting close, not to the end of the life, but I think there's an end to a book here coming close, because I just, I feel that way. But every day something new kind of happens. And I'm like, well, that's another chapter. We're just, this book's going to be hella long, man, because it's got all these great chapters now. So it's important that when I do it, I feel comfortable about it, because you have to go out and sell your book. You just do. And I'm uncomfortable with that, going out and selling something. I know that I know it's going to be able to benefit and help others. And I got to remind myself of that and remove myself from the equation. but I don't know if I'm mentally in a place where I could go, sell a book right now.
Yeah, I love it because you're still writing the story. And I do have an idea of the ending, but I want to just tell you, I think it's, I know this. I know that your son is going to be proud to have your name. I know that you're going to go back to your town where you're from, and that's going to be somehow part of the ending when they receive you in such a way, because I know that they'd love to have you now. Who you are now, they'd love to have. And I know that story and that part of your journey of where you were and where you are now, that complete journey will be completed in knowing that you are the person you are now, the person who's impacting lives, making a huge difference, and will continue to do so for your life.
Well, I hope so. I'm going to continue to try to do that. And I appreciate you taking the time. I'm an admirer of yours. You were a mentor of mine from afar. You may have not even known it. So.
Well, thanks, Ryan. That means a lot. And you inspire me. Your story inspires me. And now we've inspired even more to watch you on the journey. And like so many others, like we're cheering you on because we know the impact you're having. And I know you're going to speak to more and more people, companies, organizations. So anyone who's listening out there, like your talks, I watched your UW talk. I mean, blown away. So I'm excited to see you do more of that to impact more people. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it.